Got it.
So we can still chit chat. I just didn't want to forget it. And I know that there's a box that pops up for everybody else. Yeah. And Lola, I'm so glad you made it. Yay.
One doesn't know until they get here.
Yeah, exactly. Ellie's waving at you.
Oh, wow. This meeting is recorded. Yeah, got it.
I
All
can see
right.
here.
So we may have a few people. Mona White. I don't know if you've had a chance to meet her. She lives down in E-Town, but she is very much works with Rita and Betsy and many others, Susan Kelly in the league, to do, again, any type of education regarding natural resources and environmental issues. So I'm really glad that Rita and Betsy and Mona and Susan are here, and Rochelle is also a strong environmentalist. Yeah,
Sure.
yay.
I'll never know why I'm the only black and white. No matter what Zoom I go on, I'm black and white.
No, you're not.
No, I'm seeing it in color, Lola.
I'm seeing you in color.
Oh,
No,
good.
I see you in white.
No, I'm in black and white to myself, but amen, I'm glad. That's great.
Hmm.
Not like Diana with her nice red pink shirt.
Well, I'm just happy to be here because I don't often have meltdowns, but my laptop, it was close. Helen knows that was as close as I get.
Okay,
Yeah.
because Mama.
And I'm so happy Mary Alice is joining us too. Again, another strong environmentalist in our midst. So good evening, Mary Alice.
Thank you. Good evening to you.
Good evening. And good evening to Natalie. Natalie, I don't know you, I don't think. So can you help us with your last name? Maybe not. Okay. And I'm glad to see Susie Johnson joining.
Oh, Susie Johnson. Yes.
Yeah. So we will give them maybe another moment.
I will right here.
Betsy.
There we go. No, we don't.
All right.
Huh.
Well, just for now, I'm going to mute all just for the moment. All right, and I'm going to ask Ray to unmute, so we have him ready to go. So, and Helen, I'm going to ask Helen to unmute. All right. So we're going to start our program. It is being recorded, so we should be able to turn it into a YouTube video at a later time, and we can share that with folks that couldn't make it. So welcome everyone to the League of Women Voters of the North Country. Helen Nurska. Helen, say a greeting. Hello.
Hello,
And,
everybody.
We're the co-presidents of our local league, and we have many friends and members and board members on right now, and all of us concerned with natural resources and the environment and climate change. And we are absolutely thrilled to invite back a dear friend of mine. I've known Ray and Lola Johnson almost my whole adult life. I met them in the Adirondack Mountain Club, and that was over 35 years ago. So I've always admired and looked up to Ray and Lola. And many of you may know, Ray has become really a climate science expert in our area. He's written over 150 articles, and we know from the Press Republican, they get published once a month in the climate science feature. And we really appreciate your many years of being a scientist in our area. And he's also teaches at SUNY Plattsburgh, and a wonderful father and grandfather of many now. And Ray, I'm going to turn it over to you, but before I do, I know he has a fabulous PowerPoint. And I'm going to spotlight him so that he can present his PowerPoint. But for all of us, it might be easier if you change your view when it comes time, if you have something called side by side. That allows you to be able, when he shares his screen, to see him and his PowerPoint. And if you move the bar over, you can actually make his picture smaller and his slide bigger so you can see it. I know it's a little bit of technology, but it really, we practiced it yesterday and it worked.
And it worked, yes.
It did work. So I'm going to spotlight Ray. And so, you know, he'll be there for everyone. And if you want to go ahead and share your screen, Ray, and it should be, we should be able to view side by side. That looks awesome. And then he's going to start his. Okay, and I don't. There you go. All right. So I'm going to mute myself. If people, Ray said he'd accept questions during his presentation, but what we thought we'd do is if you would please put it in the chat, and I will follow the chat and then break in when there's a pause and ask the question. So Ray, the stage is yours, and Helen and I will mute for now.
Very good. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Helen. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with the situation that we're facing in terms of climate and the primary cause of that. And so I'm going to be fairly brief on that aspect of it and on the actual mechanism for climate warming. So what I'd want to do is just move then into some of the other issues and some of the other aspects of climate science, and then the big disruption that's happening now. Those who may have watched the Super Bowl this weekend saw probably 7 or more ads for electric vehicles from different manufacturers, many of which have not even hit the road yet, but it just shows what's happening in terms of this transition, this big energy transition we're moving through. Okay, so here's the first slide. This is the 800-pound gorilla, and it's a cartoon, if you will, or a sketch with carbon in the middle and oxygen on each side. So this is carbon dioxide, and this is the primary greenhouse gas. And this is the molecule that, when we emit it to the atmosphere, absorbs some of the infrared energy that's normally lost to space and is returned to the surface of our planet. So it's really quite simple. And it's not a bad guy. It just happens to be one of its properties. It just does what it does. We do have a lot of data, and you may have seen this graph before. And it's about 800,000 years of measurements of carbon dioxide that have been obtained in various ice cores. And you can see over the various periods of time, it's been as low as maybe 180. The left-hand axis is in parts per million. So it's been as low as about 180 parts per million. And then in an ice age situation, and then the carbon dioxide levels will increase again and go up to maybe 250. And there's one point there where it hit actually 300 parts per million. So the carbon dioxide cycle has gone down, gone up, gone down, and up over the last 800,000 years. What's different is today, in 2020, we're higher than any measurement in the last 800,000 years. So we're in brand new territory. And the correlation between these levels of carbon dioxide and the ice age period that we're in now with temperature is very, very tight. So in this, on these two charts, we see both the Antarctic temperature and carbon dioxide levels, and they're pretty much in lockstep. When the CO2 levels go up, the temperature goes up. When the CO2 levels go down, temperature goes down. Both in Antarctica and the ice core sample there, as well as the global average from Greenland, other glaciers and ice formations, as well as Antarctica. Again, when the CO2 levels go up, temperature goes up. When the CO2 levels, temperatures go down. And that's what we're seeing today. Today, we're about, on a global average, about 2 degrees warmer than we've been in the recent past. Okay. As hunter-gatherers, we made a transition about 10,000 years ago to farming and more sedentary life, villages and towns and cities. And as you can see, the direct air measurements and indirect air measurements of carbon dioxide have been very constant over that period of time until now. And in the last couple of centuries, we are very different than where we've been for the last 10,000 years. And this is direct air measurements done by a University of California graduate student back in the 1950s, where he sampled air and found that the best place to measure it was at the Mauna Loa Observatory, where the air is well mixed as it crosses the Pacific Ocean. And so this is the longest running measurement of direct CO2 measurements in the atmosphere. And as you can see, we're climbing and it's not slowing down at all. So here is the global surface temperature. And again, as we mentioned earlier, in terms of the correlation between CO2 levels and temperature, you can see here that the global surface temperature has been increasing significantly over the last basically 80 years. And so this is the increase that we have seen. It's not the, it's the average, and it's not necessarily what's happening in the Arctic with a 5-degree temperature change or a reduction in temperature change, say in Florida. So it's an average temperature increase. However, globally, the last 10 years have been the 10 hottest years have been since 2013. And 2021 is somewhere in the middle, but the warmest year on record so far is 2016. So this is the record over the last 100+ years, and these 10 hottest years have all happened since 2013. And just get down to the granular situation in Albany, New York. This is from Climate Central. There's been a 5.6 degree temperature change. So this is what I mean by global average versus local temperature experience that can vary a lot. This is an interesting photo. This is taken in February 2021. And it shows a Russian tanker going through the polar route north of Siberia, and it's accompanied by an icebreaker. This is brand new in the sense that Arctic shipping usually stopped in November and began again in May. But this is what the Arctic looked like last winter in February. And so this is opening up a brand new avenue of commerce with implications still to be determined. One of the aspects that we're experiencing, and you may have heard some news in the last couple of days about projected sea level rise. This is what's happening now. And we're seeing about 3.5 millimeters of sea level rise per year. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but if you put 3 dimes on top of each other, That's about 3 millimeters. And that's happening every year. And so it's beginning to add up. Over the past century, the sea levels have risen almost a foot, and they're projected to rise another foot in the next 20 to 30 years. So I mentioned the 800-pound gorilla, and as you can see here, the carbon dioxide from fossil fuel is about 65%, and then there's another segment of from forestry and land use. So about 3/4 of the greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, with a contribution from methane, nitrous oxide, and some of the refrigerants, the fluorine gases as seen here. And there's two basic primary sources. One is transportation, the other is electricity generation. So it's kind of interesting this Sunday to see so many car companies extolling the virtue of electric vehicles. And if indeed this does take place and we can meet the electricity need by those electric vehicles, this will go a long way toward reducing the amount of CO2 we emit to the atmosphere. The other big one, obviously, is the electricity. And if we can get renewables to satisfy our thirst for electricity, this will be about 2/3 of the amount of greenhouse gases that we're currently emitting. So this is 2021, and it was a busy year from a extreme climate or extreme weather situations. As you can see here, the West had a lot of wildfires. The Midwest had a lot of what's called derechos or straight wind formations and tornadoes. And then the tornadoes in the Southeast, and then the hurricanes along the coast of the United States. We were lucky in 2021, New England. We basically escaped any major billion-dollar disasters. But the total amount of money that these disasters cost our country, our economy, was about $145 billion. And so it's beginning to cost us in terms of not addressing the situation with the increased CO2 levels and the resulting extreme climate experiences that we're having. This is Hurricane Ida last August, and you can just see how big it is. It hit Louisiana, but it was the most expensive weather disaster of 2021, with over $70 billion of costs associated with that particular event. So there's a couple of things that concern as we continue on with our emitting large amounts of greenhouse gases every year. There's concerns that are arising, and the melting of the permafrost is a big one. Permafrost contains large amounts of methane, which is a much more potent greenhouse gas that will be released to the air. And as this feedback of warming of the permafrost and releasing of the methane, it's going to be a cycle. It's going to be a tipping point. The other thing is there's recent data that show that the Gulf Stream coming across from Europe into the coastal part of the United States is beginning to slow down, caused mostly by melting ice and cold water being emitted in the North Atlantic. And this has the potential for some major changes. Both the water will pile up along the East Coast and cause a higher than average amount of water there, as well as bringing colder temperatures to Europe. Another situation that seems to be accelerating is the melting of the ice sheets in both Antarctica and Greenland. And as they melt, the melt water goes to the base of the ice sheet and lubricates their slide into the ocean in a manner that could become unstoppable. And even if we went to zero carbon dioxide emissions, chances are very good that those ice sheets would continue to advance into the ocean. And then, of course, we have climate refugees and social justice issues in terms of the impact of the carbon dioxide emissions and the extreme climate events. So it gets complicated. But here we are in terms of per capita emissions. And if we look at this, we see we're tied with Saudi Arabia in terms of the number of tons per person that the US emits. So each one of us emits on average about 17 tons of carbon dioxide per year. And if we go down to the bottom there, we look at China. On a per capita basis, they're about 1/3 the emissions of the countries on the top of the list there, Canada, US, and Saudi Arabia. The issue with China, of course, is the size of their population. But in terms of the per capita, they are way down on the list. This photograph really fascinated me. This is one of the newer container ships that have been built in the last 2 or 3 years. This one holds 19,000 containers. And when you think about the fact that each container has goods that have been manufactured somewhere in Asia, and then they're transported to either the US or Europe, you have the emissions associated with not only with the manufacture, but with the transport. And once a big ship like this hits harbor and those individual containers are taken off, they're put on trucks, which then emit more emissions as they're brought to Albany, Plattsburgh, and everywhere in between, from Los Angeles to where the ships come in, or Netherlands. So this tremendous amount of international commerce is a big source of carbon dioxide emissions. I understand there's been a couple of newer ships that have been put together that will transport up to 22,000 containerized shipping units. Gus Speth is he was the originator of the NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council. And this is a comment that he made that I thought it would be appropriate to share, and that this materialism can be toxic and we're losing our connection to the natural world. However, there's a lot going on. There's lots of activism to change the direction that we're taking, and nonviolent protests and artist statements are a part of this activism. And I had the pleasure with Jackie Roy to attend this climate march in Montreal in September 2019. And it was just fascinating. If you look at the people here in the image, you'll see most of them are young. And they have a lot invested in the future, of course, and they are in many cases angry, and they're protesting and looking for change in a direction. And being in Canada, this Joan of Arc image has superimposed on it Greta Thunberg's face. And I thought it was very interesting to see this in the crowd. This is a drone. We could hear the drones above our head, but this is an image that I got from the web showing this is Avenue du Parc, going through the park in central Montreal, and just gives you some idea of what that number of people looks like. It was an amazing experience, and this captures the crowd in part, and it was very peaceful, very interesting. The signs were fascinating, very creative in many cases, unprintable in others, but interesting. So in addition to Montreal, protests have been held in many places around the world. And this past fall was the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change meeting in Glasgow, Scotland. And there were protests in England, and I just wanted to share a couple of photos here. These people were protesting in London, And that image just to the right of the word arrested is an image for the group Extinction Rebellion. It's a group of activists who on a moment's notice can get to a place and protest what they see fits with their mission of trying to arrest the direction that we're in. And so she was arrested, and she was, I think she's 68 years old. This woman is 67 years old. You can see St. Peter's Church in the background with the Thames River. And here's another woman in her late 50s who was also arrested in protesting the lack of action by the British government. And then we have an artist, Maya Lin. She's made many strong artist statements, and including the Storm King Mountain Sculpture Park. But this is a recent one that was last year in 2021 from about April or May through November. And it took place in a park in New York City. And it was fascinating because what she did was go to southern New Jersey, where saltwater intrusion into the low-lying land has killed large numbers of white Atlantic cedar trees. So she, with a forester, harvested about 40 or 45 of these cedar trees and planted them, if you will, in New York City. I think this is Bryant Park around 32nd Street. And as a statement as to the impact of sea level rise on us. And you can walk around these, through these, and just get a feeling for the impact of rising sea levels caused by climate change on our environment. I have a woman, Ana Fernandez. She lives in the San Francisco area, and she read an article about how much the sea level is going to increase by about 2100. And so when she visited the Pacific Ocean, she really got inspired to make a statement, if you will. And so this is a group of people that support her efforts. And what she did was come up with these 6-foot tubes that she filled with seawater, just to give an idea as to what the ocean would look like in 2100 when it was 6 feet higher. And she lit them so that they had a kind of a ghostly appearance, but it was her way of taking this factoid, if you will, and converting it into a sculpture. Then in 2020, a climate clock was installed. This is in New York City in Union Square. They put this clock on the wall reflecting the 7 years, 103 days, 15 minutes, whatever it is, 10 seconds, to show that this is what the scientists had estimated in 2020, that we had that much more time to stop our emission of greenhouse gases before things really got out of control. And I haven't seen it myself, but it's fascinating to see that this building was willing to put this clock up, and it's available for every passerby that is in that area. I don't think this person needs any introduction to me. She was very active in the fall of 2021, trying to galvanize, motivate politicians, policymakers into doing more about arresting the emissions of greenhouse gases. She's really quite a phenomenon. I think she turned 18 this January. She started at 15, and she's been responsible for literally millions of young people marching around the world on every continent to protest government policies and to encourage governments to take the leadership on reducing emissions. There are some very aggressive, necessary, ambitious goals that the current administration has put out. And that is to try and reduce the emissions by half by 2030. And then there's a Cape Wind, or an installation of wind turbines off of Massachusetts. This was denied a permit in 2016 and was approved in 2021. And it's pretty good size. It's going to be almost the size of a nuclear power plant, 800 megawatts, and it's going to be complete next year, or I think it's 2 years. So that's progress. There's also an initiative to have what's called the 30-30, conserve 30% of America by 2030. We've got a long way to go. We're only at 12% now, with 25% of the waters protected. But there's a lot of voluntary efforts by states and private landowners with conservation easements and so forth. And so we'll see how that develops over the next few years. Supporting the manufacture and purchase of EVs. We may have heard that one of his Build Back Better initiatives was to install 500,000 EV charging stations. That may not happen, but I noticed that the Department of Transportation is starting to use some of the money that was approved in 2021 to install a large number. I don't know what the number will be, but it'll be in excess of 100,000 EV charging stations. And then modernizing the electrical grid, phase out coal burning plants, build out more renewables, and basically to stop building vehicles. ICE is internal combustion engines by 2035. So this is just a map showing some of the opportunities that exist along the East Coast. The only functioning one now is off of Rhode Island, #1 there. But some of the others near Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, that's one of the Cape Wind ones that's going up now, that's being built now. There's another small one off of Norfolk, Virginia, and the others are being permitted, and the necessary environmental reviews are being done to hopefully get them built and operating. But let's take a look at the global solar PV installations by country. Look who's #1, China, by far, 2 to 3 times the next closest country, which in this case is the US. So they know they have an emissions problem. They know they have an air quality problem, and they are trying very hard and investing a lot of money to try and change that situation. Now, this is global solar. Look at global wind. Same situation. More than twice the nearest country in terms of installation of renewables. So they are, again, very aware of what the issues are that they're facing as a country, and they're trying to really change the source of their energy. This is kind of an interesting chart because it shows the growth since 2010 of global solar photovoltaics. And if you look at that chart, you can see it's really starting to climb, and climb at a very rapid rate. It's not asymptotic, but it's not linear. It is growing very rapidly. And this is a lot of gigawatts of potential power. It doesn't produce that 24 hours a day, but it does produce it maybe at the 50% of that capacity. And so it looks very promising that this will continue to rise sharply, and that this investment in solar PV will really begin to make a difference in our emissions. And same with wind. In 2010, we had some. In 2020, we got a lot, and there's more coming. So both of these renewables should have a big impact on our ability to reduce our consumption of fossil fuels, hopefully. 2020, for the first time, coal was less than, the amount of coal used to generate electricity was less than that for renewables for the first time. So the top curve there is coal. and they kind of all nucleate on the right-hand side there in 2020 with renewables, nuclear and coal. But the renewables is the rising one, the coal is the dropping one, and nuclear is kind of constant. We haven't built any new nuclear plants in a number of years. So this is kind of a landmark, because in 2010, coal was king. And it's not so much king now, although right now with the issues we're having with sufficient energy and an economy that's really taking off, coal is beginning to rise again. But it's really has dropped significantly since 2010. So we have a major disruption that is happening right now. And one of them took place a little over a century ago, horses to automobiles. So let me just show you an image. Some of you may have seen this before because I find it a fascinating photograph. This is Easter Sunday in New York City on Fifth Avenue. And I was told that there is an automobile in this picture, but I could not find it. These are all horse-drawn carriages except for one, according to the New York City Archives. Well, let's look at what New York City Fifth Avenue looked like 13 years later. No horse-drawn carriages, zero. So this was a major change when you think about it in terms of all the things you needed to bring about a transition like this. There was farms, there was need for grain, stalls, farriers, places for these horses to stay. I mean, there was a large infrastructure situation to support the horse transportation system that was in place in 1900. And then 13 years later, it was basically gone. So we're in a similar situation now. If things continue to go as predicted, and that our government continues to push electric vehicles, the ICE should stop being manufactured by 2035. There are lots of plans for electric powered airplanes and school buses. Actually, Quebec has a big electric school bus manufacturing plant. Same with electric trucks. And basically the issue is to electrify everything. This is a concept by an Israeli company. They've removed the engines and put in two electric motors, and it will meet a large, it could meet a large amount of the traffic in Europe, for instance, where the mileage is reduced, where it's less than 400 miles. It goes at a decent clip. And it's just the start of many different airplanes that are being considered and built as prototypes at this time. And here's the electric school bus. Lion is a Quebec company, and they've sold hundreds of these buses in Quebec. Even with the power coming from the Hudson Bay project, they're still moving ahead with electric buses just for air quality and protect their children from inhaling a lot of diesel fuel particles. This is a concept truck. It has not been made yet. The cab has been made, and it has been on some test drives. This is by Tesla, and it's intended to have long haul electric motor in the truck. And it would go 400 miles from, say, Los Angeles to say, Nevada or some places, points east, Arizona, New Mexico, drop off its cargo, and then be recharged and go back. So it would be a perfect vehicle for transporting those thousands and thousands of shipping containers that we saw earlier. Battery powered chainsaw. And then what's happening now is the fact that EVs have penetrated the European market a lot. So the PEV is a plug-in electric vehicle, whether it's a battery, a BEV, or a plug-in hybrid, like we see below that. But the fact is that in the UK, 21% of the new auto registrations were plug-in electric vehicles. And if we look at Germany, Germany was at 30.4% plug-in electric vehicles. And if we look at Sweden, it was 53.9%. And Norway takes the prize. They're up at 85%. And I saw recent numbers for January, although not in chart form like this, that they're up to 90% of the total auto registrations at this point in time. So government policies can have a big, big difference in terms of making this transition happen and happen fairly quickly. Unfortunately, we need basically a pandemic every year to get emissions down so we don't exceed the 2 degrees centigrade. Doesn't have to be a pandemic, it could be government policies, but that's the reduction in CO2 emissions in 2020 would have to happen every year. There's an organization called RARE, and Lola and I went to a conference at the National Geographic in March of 2019. And RARE and beehive.org made some very interesting presentations on there are solutions today. And one of the projects was called Drawdown. And this is a busy slide, and it's the last one I have. And it just shows that there are a lot of potential solutions that exist right now. In the lower right, there's two of them that I think are very important. And one is educating girls, and then family planning, along with solar farms and electric vehicles and wind turbines and so forth. So there's a lot that can be done. And whether it's managing grazing land or geothermal, you name it, there's about 80 solutions. And if you go online to Project Drawdown, you can get more details on any of these. And finally, I'd like to thank various organizations that contributed to this data set. And there are more. And I want to thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you.
All right. Ray, if you could stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
All right. And then we could all go back to gallery view. Yay. And would love to, again, I can't thank you enough for that tremendous presentation. And I found it extremely hopeful. I am much more encouraged after seeing it and hearing from you, but I know we may have some questions from our audience. So please feel free to unmute yourselves and and jump in.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Ellie.
Yeah, Ray, I have some questions and concerns that kind of tie together, and I've been waiting to ask somebody about this. As we work so hard to reduce our use of electricity, we're faced with Bitcoin and these currencies coming along, and I wondered, this is my first question, I wondered how they will raise the demand for electricity just as we're working so hard to reduce it. And the other, yeah, go ahead.
Let me answer that, Ellie. Yeah, you're correct that the Bitcoin and its data mining and security issues do consume enormous amounts of electricity. They're trying to use more efficient servers to handle some of that power requirements, but it is an unknown at this point, but it is a major consumption of electricity, which is why they wanted to locate in Plattsburgh, which is why they wanted to locate in Rouse's Point.
Right.
So that's something that we have to contend with.
Okay, and my other question is sort of two or three things together. So I'm really excited that you're here. I'm concerned about as we switch over to other ways of producing our electricity. I tend to love the countryside. And when I look at these solar panels spread out for miles across what used to be open land, or I see lots and lots of wind turbines where there used to be, we used to worry about protecting the view shed. I wonder how long we're going to tolerate these more inefficient and sources of electricity that really have a downside of their own. Everything does. And when we're going to start looking at, we don't have fusion, but when are we going to start looking again, being forced to look at nuclear power, and what are the implications of that?
There's been a number of articles on siting of both solar and wind. And one of the benefits of offshore wind is the fact that it can be sited either at the edge of visibility from land or close to it, which is what makes the shallow waters off of Long Island and Cape Cod very amenable to wind farms. Same as off of the coast of New Jersey and Virginia and so forth. But it's not going to meet a lot of our demand. There's still going to be a big demand for onshore wind farms. And that's where you get into siting, and where it has to be agreed to by the people living there that the benefits are better. Kansas, as I understand it, Nebraska get a large percentage, like more than 50% of their electricity needs from wind farms. And for farmers out there, for them, it brings in a fair amount of revenue per turbine. And some of them are keeping basically in business because of the revenue from the turbines in the Midwest. The other one is solar. That's one of the reasons why the US needs a better grid, so that if we took 20 square miles of desert in Nevada or New Mexico and converted that to a solar farm, we would need to transport those electrons across the US in order to get them to where we need them. So we do need proper siting, and we do need to have a better grid to handle the flow of electrons to from where they're generated to where they need to go. But there's no easy answer. Unless we consume less, I don't know. There's only 2 nuclear power plants in the United States that are under construction now. Both of them are in Georgia. One of them is expected to be completed this year. The cost of the electricity from that nuclear power plant is much higher than it would be from either solar or wind or coal. So there is a cost factor in terms of nuclear. They are talking about building smaller nuclear power plants that could be replicated and built on an industrial scale that would be smaller and efficient, but there's still nuclear power plants. They're still going to consume nuclear fuels. They're still going to generate long-term residues that we have to contend with. There's no easy answer, Ellie.
Thank you.
There solar panels, solar farms are coming to Peru, New York. They're out sending letters out to property owners, asking if they can come in and evaluate if you have a certain amount of land. And I think there's already one in Peru, but the offers on the table, the offers are being put on the table. So it's very interesting.
Well, there's another factor too, and that is the efficiency of solar panels have changed a lot in the last 10 years. In 2012, panels were normally about 220 watts. By 2014, they were up to about 250 watts per panel. By 2018, they were 300 watts per panel. And I understand now they're up to 350 watts per panel. So the technology is improving their ability to generate electricity, which then would reduce the number of panels that you need and reduce the size of the footprint that you would need to generate power. So technology will have an effect, but it's still going to be a footprint for those panels somewhere. I understand that there's a solar farm going up on Route 11 in Champlain now. Moores Forks has 2 large 10 to 20 acre solar farms that you go along Route 11, and it's amazing. And the farmer there apparently is loving it because it's keeping his farm intact because of the income from the solar. And they're also trying to use that land for 2 purposes, not only to house the solar photovoltaic panels, but also to graze underneath it sheep and goats and small livestock. Cows, I think, are a problem because they're so big and strong. But they're using some of these other farm animals to graze underneath the panels. So there's a lot of things being tried. There's no really magic answer, but a lot of things are being tried, and technology is definitely going to have an impact.
Thank
I
you, Ray.
have
No,
a question.
Harvey and Sarah have their hand up.
Yeah, Ray, that's first of all, thank you you got me?
Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very, very much for an excellent discussion. I always enjoy them. But I want to ask you, Ray, in an early slide where you were giving the percentages of what contributes to, the emissions of the gases, I didn't see agriculture listed. And then in your last slide, there was one little part that said plant nutrition is one of the solutions. And I think that agriculture does play a significant role in the production of, of emission of the greenhouse gases. And I didn't see it in that particular slide. I didn't see agriculture, or did I miss it?
I think in that earliest slide, there was 2 slides there. One of them did talk about agriculture and the use of fertilizers and the emissions of nitrous oxides that contributed to it. But it's also a solution because there's a lot of work being done to have no-till agriculture and to reduce the amount of fertilizer that one needs. That's still in its early stages. I think we have seen it even in the North Country here. Farmers will plant seeds in a field in which the stubble from the previous year is still visible. So there are opportunities for that, but it means change in the way you're used to doing business, and change is hard and it has complications.
And change in the way we eat.
Yes.
That's huge.
Yes.
Ray, thank you very much.
Thanks. And
I have a
Ellie,
question.
let's let Lola, you have a question, and then back to Ellie.
I just have a comment. I remember the first time we flew out west. Can you hear me? Am I okay? We got off the plane and I've never seen anything so startling as the presence of oil rigs. And they were everywhere. They were out at the airport, and I can never compare them to any kind of source of solar energy. They just hurt the earth and they're disgusting. So I just want to make that comparison as sources of energy are concerned. I'll take a solar panel any day of the week. That's all.
Thanks, Lola. Ellie, go ahead.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I share Harvey's concern about cows and methane, and the numbers are pretty humbling about that. And since, as with Harvey, we're vegetarian, we really do get concerned about this. But I wanted to ask, how long, what is the life expectancy of windmills like the ones up in, or whatever they're called now, turbines, the ones up in the Ellenberg area, and these solar panels? And do the farmers have any economic disadvantage when these things need to be replaced, don't work so well. I mean, I'm wondering, who has the disadvantage? And is it the farmer who thinks it's so wonderful now? Will he or she have to be the person decommissioning it? Or does it never get decommissioned? Does someone come out and keep fixing it? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess what I do know, and I've never seen a contract with the farmer, what I do know, they have a lifespan of perhaps 25 years, but
Mhm.
as a mechanical device, they do need repair, they do need maintenance. And so you will need to have access to those turbines for a period of time. Beyond that, as far as I would assume, there must be something in the contract that makes the company who installed them responsible, but I don't know that for a fact.
I've seen paperwork on that, Ray, and yes, they are totally responsible for what they put in there, and when they take it out, it's supposed to be just like they were never there. However, that
Okay.
can happen, but yes, the contract really covers all those things. That, like, yeah.
Thanks. Some other questions? Mona, do you have any questions?
I have a question. It's Mona. I'm not on, my camera's not working, but I'm with you and I've enjoyed every bit of this so far. I have a question for our speaker. Carbon capture, what's being done? I've read about it. I don't know exactly what it means, but is there something that can be done in the way of capturing carbon?
The U.S. government, as part of the current budget cycle, has a number of contracts out to do just that. It's called CCS, carbon capture and storage. There's two ways that they're investigating this. One is to try and capture it at the site, at the location of its generation, like out of the smokestack of a coal burning plant or a natural gas burning plant. So it's more concentrated. The other is to capture the CO2 from the air once it's generated and it's distributed. There is some research being done in Iceland right now. They have a small plant that is there removing CO2 from the air, even at 400 parts per million, and then condensing it and putting it underground. The geological formation there apparently takes that CO2 and turns it into rock. Now, the problem is that it takes a lot of energy and a lot of capital to build a plant like that and to make it run and to get those 400 parts per million CO2 out of the air into the ground. So this is a demonstration project. There's been a number of photographs in the Times and elsewhere showing this. And it only started in 2021, I think, maybe late 2020. And it's going to run for a few years as they get data on how efficient it is, how much more energy it takes. And the obvious thing is you need to have the subsurface structure that would take that CO2 and convert it into rock. What's happening now in the U.S. when the U.S. does carbon capture and storage, and there are some experimental units available in the Southwest, is they take that carbon dioxide, liquefy it, and pump it back down into the oil wells to produce more oil. So it's not something that is really what we need, in my view. But there are attempts being made to do that in the U.S. But in my view, to take carbon dioxide, pump it into the ground in order to produce more oil, to produce more carbon dioxide, is a circle that doesn't make environmental sense.
No, absolutely not. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mona, for your question. Hap, go ahead.
Yeah, Ray. one of the efficient devices that they had for getting carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere were trees. Can you speak to the loss of rainforests and what that has done towards accelerating greenhouse gases in the atmosphere?
Well, I think it's unfortunate. We're losing rainforests not only in Brazil, but also across Africa and Indonesia and so forth. And the latest data I saw or read was about the rainforest in Brazil, and they're becoming net emitters of carbon dioxide, not net trapping or sequestering carbon dioxide. So it is a serious problem, and with Bolsonaro there as their leader and promoting the conversion of a lot of the rainforest to farmland, it's not a good sign. This planting 1 billion trees initiative that they had a year or two ago is great, but I'm not sure that it's progressing very far. And to plant a little seedling that's 6 inches tall is going to take a long time before it has any kind of a positive impact. Not that you can't do some of that. It could be a little bit like that rare circular chart I had showing the 80 solutions. Plant trees is a good one. Don't cut any more of the rainforest is a better one.
Thank you, Hap. I do have some comment and a question from Rochelle. She had to leave early, but she suggested checking out the Third Act, an initiative that Bill McKibben has organized to enlist activism among seniors. And there's lots of resources and actions to take advantage of. And a question that she'd like to ask is, how sustainable is our extractive economy? This economy and consumer culture lead to destruction of ecosystems and watersheds. I think it's worthwhile to look more broadly into shifting to sustainable lifeways and economies. Reducing carbon emissions is only a partial solution. We need to preserve ecosystems.
Exactly.
Well, I think she hit the nail on the head. The Club of Rome in the 1970s came out with the fact that we are consuming more of our planet than at a rate more than it's being replaced. And it hasn't changed. You can see that in photos of the rainforest that Hap was talking about. In terms of our water, the drought out west. There's a lot of issues that we face in terms of our extractive economy. There's no doubt about it. And yes, the Third Act is a good one that Bill McKibben has started. And I think that there is hope that if enough people get involved, enough people make some choices, that we can reduce the amount of extractive things that we take from the planet. That 30-30 initiative sounds promising. I don't know whether it's achievable, where we preserve 30% of the United States, both its land and its water. So no, Rochelle is correct. We are definitely taking more than we should from the planet. No doubt. There is a limit.
Well, thanks to Rochelle for that question. We're coming close to, we're just after 8. Was there any last question that someone has burning that they'd like to get out there before we close? Go ahead. I have 2, 3. Mary Alice, go ahead, and then Betsy and Ellie. Go ahead. Ray, do you mind a few more
No.
questions? Go
Absolutely
ahead.
fine.
Okay, Mary Alice, you'll need to unmute.
There we go. Okay. Public transit has been under systematic attack for decades by both the oil and gas and the automobile industry. And part of that has been fostering a negative attitude. People who ride public transit are just losers. What can we do about reversing that attitude and also restoring more frequent and reliable public transit service, because that would take cars off the road and would help everybody breathe.
You know, if you look at a map of New York State, say 10, 15 years ago, you would not have seen any bicycle trails, any hiking trails. But today, New York State has 600 some odd miles of bicycle trails leading from New York City to Canada or from Albany to Buffalo. So that's a big shift. And so there is a big recreational component now to our entertainment, to our ability to move. And this is major. I was looking at a map recently of Saratoga County and the hiking and bike trails along the Mohawk River. It's just amazing how we can do things that really make sense. There's another organization called Rails the Trails, taking old railroads and converting them into bike paths or hiking paths. There's an East Coast Greenway organization that goes from Maine down to Key West, and they've got about 60% of the trail established. So there are things that we can do. It doesn't answer your question particularly about mass transit. And that is something that is in the current bill that has been passed in Congress. But it's tough to have people give up their cars. And I don't know how it's going to work. In a metropolitan area, it obviously works. In a more rural area, it's more difficult. And I personally kind of like seeing the price of gas go up because maybe people won't buy the big gas guzzlers. But the counterpoint to that is that it puts pressure on our current administration that they're not doing enough to pull more fossil fuels out of the ground, and people get annoyed when they spend $50 on a tank full of gas. So it's
You have to give people
complicated.
an alternative way to get to work and bring home groceries.
I go crazy when I go to the post office and I see a big truck out there with its engine idling, keeping the cabin warm while he's inside. That's just the way it is.
Hmm.
But I echo Mary Alice's, this is a really, truly rural concern with transportation. It's huge. I mean, how do people get to work and get groceries? It's a tough number. So that is certainly something that impacts rural areas more than the metropolitan areas. Betsy Metz, go ahead. Betsy, we can't hear you. Betsy, we still can't hear you. Will you be able to type your question into the chat? Yeah, Betsy, we're not able to hear you. Sorry. Type your question into the chat. Ellie, go ahead with your question.
Okay, yes, I'm unmuted. Ray, first I want to thank you. This has been terrific. And I'm going to give you my question, but I want to also then make a very, very brief statement. My question is about natural gas. A lot of our homes here are using gas. And we talk about fossil fuels and methane. I'd like you to just say something about that and how bad that is, or good or better, I don't know. But my other statement is there's a third rail in every issue, whether we're talking about climate change or we're talking about environmental issues. The third rail now that nobody touches, not even environmental groups, is the issue of world population and US population. And when I was born, the United States, the world rather, had half the number of people it does now. There's only so much compensating we're going to do in the future unless somebody begins to discuss that issue every time we discuss other issues. I know you don't, it's not relevant now, but I just mention it because it's there behind us, under us, over us all the time. It's a population is an important issue and we are growing. So anyway, the natural gas.
Well, it's interesting. The term natural gas sounds natural, like it's good. It's really methane. And we all know that methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. Having said that, natural gas or methane is more efficient than oil or coal in terms of producing energy. It produces less carbon dioxide per unit of energy than the other fossil fuels. The downside is that in the United States, we have probably 2 million oil wells that have not been capped and that are producing a large amounts of methane into the atmosphere. And then once you collect, if you do collect the methane, which is not always done, it has to be liquefied and transported by pipes. And so there's a lot of leakage that goes on. And so there are attempts being made by certain companies to reinvest money or invest money in improving the infrastructure, the piping infrastructure, because we lose about somewhere around 10 to 15% of the methane that we harvest every year from the planet. And so we can do better. It is Obama called it a bridge fuel, and it is a bridge fuel moving from coal to gas. It is more efficient in its ability to produce energy. But it's not without its own problems. And natural gas is probably not the right term, and methane would be a better term. And it's going to be with us a while. Europe is highly dependent upon natural gas, and this is what's causing the geopolitical issues in Europe. Germany particularly gets about 60–70% of its energy from Russia. So it's a complicated issue. It's better than coal and oil, but it still has its own problems.
All right. Betsy, are you trying to type your question? No, it's not working. Okay. All right. Well, I want to tell you again, Professor Johnson, you really schooled us so much in a visual way that helped many of us understand the problem, but also was wonderful to hear some of the hopeful things going on. I see one more question by Donna Seymour. Donna her hand went up, but she's not okay.
Was just clapping my hands for his presentation.
That's clapping your hands, not asking a question. So yes, we're clapping, and I can't thank you enough for the efforts, your personal efforts, because this was not your occupation for many years in the North Country, but you have made it your area of interest and expertise, and have done everything you could possibly do besides creating an organization and a website, but writing those articles that we get to read in the North Country every month. So you do a lot to help educate us. So we really appreciate it. The League of Women Voters, as you know, we are a nonpartisan organization, but we are a political organization. We don't support or endorse any candidates or party, but we do look at policy issues and important issues that we would like to see addressed. And there's times that the League takes positions and we lobby our government representatives. So this is a wonderful group. I know you got lots of great questions, but it's a wonderful group to take further steps. And I know they write letters to the editor, they call their representatives, and they get educated on the issues that are important to us. So thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for coming. It was wonderful to have some special guests here. Obviously, Rob and Jackie, we appreciate you being here, and there were some other folks. We appreciate Donna and some visitors that we got to meet tonight. So thanks for your time. Good night. And
Thank you,
Ray,
Diana.
any last message, any last benediction?
Night.
Well, I'm hoping that the pandemic will be behind us and we'll be able to get out into the streets again to do the necessary protests, like the Extinction Rebellion people or like any other third act group that is forming, so that we can have our voices heard and hopefully taken into account.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Bye
Thanks,
now.
Ray.
And with that, we'll say good night and thank you all. We look forward to our next forum, March, to celebrate Women's History Month. It's going to be the fabulous 5 suffragists from Clinton County, plus a few others. So join us next month. So long.
Bye.
Thanks, Ray.
Bye-bye.